Step away from the table, old man. This lounge is for real employees. The words came sharp, loud, and deliberate, like a slap that echoed through the bustling cafeteria of the downtown precinct. He was black, thin, and stooped from age. His janitor's uniform hung a little loose on his frame, but his movements were precise, measured. He had just sat down with a paper cup of coffee after mopping the hall outside the captain's office for the third time that morning. But to the white officer who had barked those words, he wasn't a man. He was a shadow, a nobody. Just another invisible figure in a city built on forgetting. Other officers turned toward the commotion. Some smirked. Others shrugged. One whispered, "Guess he forgot he's not on the guest list." The laughter that followed was quick and cruel. "Didn't you hear me, sir?" the officer sneered, drawing out the sarcasm in "sir." "This isn't the shelter down the street." The old man didn't say a word. He simply stood, not in fear, not in apology, but with the kind of quiet that unsettles men who rely on noise and rank to assert their worth. He picked up his cup and tray and walked toward the exit. As he passed the trash can, he paused, not to throw away his coffee, but to look at the officer. Their eyes met, just briefly. And for a second, something flickered in the air, something ancient and unshakable, a presence far greater than a mop or a uniform could explain. But the officer didn't see it, because people like him never look hard enough. The janitor's name was Walter Bishop. He had worked at the station for nearly 10 years. No one knew much about him. He rarely spoke, never missed a shift, and always left the building cleaner than he found it. Every hallway bore his touch. Every light fixture shone a little brighter where his hands had passed. But nobody asked about the slight limp in his step. Nobody wondered why his left hand trembled whenever the fire alarms were tested. Nobody noticed the Purple Heart tattoo faded under his sleeve, or the way he flinched at the sound of helicopters overhead. They just called him Bishop, sometimes Old Man, sometimes nothing at all. That day, after being humiliated in front of a dozen uniformed officers, Walter went back to the janitor's closet, his sanctuary. He sat on the wooden stool, placed the coffee gently on the shelf beside the bleach bottles, and pulled from the back of the cabinet a small metal box. Inside it, wrapped in cloth, was a medal. Not one of those ceremonial participation trophies that sit behind glass. No, this was a Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest military honor given in the United States Armed Forces. And it had been awarded to Master Sergeant Walter Bishop for actions in a place no one in the station had ever heard of. A jungle. A war that had no victory parade. A night that had turned blood red and silent. And this medal, unlike those handed out in ceremonies for cameras and applause, had been pinned on him in a field hospital by a dying commander who whispered, "You saved them all, Walt." But that didn't matter here. Here, he was just the janitor. That night, Officer Caleb Warren, the same man who had mocked him, uploaded a photo to his social media. A selfie with his boot near the janitor's cart and the caption, "Keepin' the place clean for real heroes, thin blue line." It went viral in a local police forum. Most people laughed, but one man didn't. 3 days later, the precinct's annual award ceremony was held. They set up folding chairs in the garage. Officers in full dress blues lined up to receive plaques and handshakes. The mayor was late. The coffee was cold. At the edge of the crowd stood Walter, holding a mop. He was about to turn away. Another day, another room to clean, when the microphone crackled. "Before we begin," the captain said, "we have one more name to call. This one is not on the program." He looked around the room, and then he nodded toward the back. "Walter Bishop, step forward, please." Murmurs broke out immediately. "What's going on? Is he retiring? Why's the janitor up there?" Walter froze. His mop handle trembled in his hand. The captain raised a sheet of paper. "Master Sergeant Walter Bishop, United States Army, recipient of the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, 3 tours, 15 confirmed extraction missions, 16 men saved from ambush, and 10 years cleaning this station without ever once being thanked." Silence. Then the captain stepped aside, and someone else emerged from the hallway. A man in full army dress uniform, 4 stars gleaming on his shoulders. General Marcus Tillman. He saluted Walter before he even reached the podium. "I don't give speeches," the general said, "but I flew here to say something simple." He turned to face the room. "Last week, one of your own mocked this man, laughed at his hands, dismissed his service. That officer did not know that Walter Bishop once carried me on his back through mortar fire while bleeding from his ribs. That I would not be standing here, none of us would, if not for men like him." He looked directly at Officer Warren. "And if you ever again mistake silence for weakness, remember this moment." Then he turned to Walter, and with the precision of someone who had done it 1,000 times before, he removed the Distinguished Service Cross from a velvet box and pinned it on Walter's chest again. "This time," he said quietly, "in front of witnesses." The applause was hesitant at first. A few officers clapped out of obligation. Others looked at their shoes, unsure of what to do with the shame blooming inside them. But there were some, those who had worn the uniform before the badge, who stood, one by one, and saluted. Walter didn't say a word. He never did. He stood still beneath the fluorescent garage lights, the metal now glinting on his janitor shirt, incongruous and yet completely rightful. General Tillman nodded once, then turned and walked out. Just like that, the ceremony was over, and nothing in that station felt the same again. Officer Caleb Warren sat alone in the locker room an hour later. The laughter from his earlier post now seemed miles away. He stared at the phone in his hand, at the photo he had once posted so smugly. The comment section had changed. It was no longer, "Ha ha, real heroes only." It was, "Take this down, man, you embarrassed the department." "He saved lives, you mop egos." "He's more of a man than you'll ever be." Warren slammed the phone down and rubbed his face with his hands. But the shame didn't come from the screen. It came from the echo in his mind of the general's voice. "If you ever again mistake silence for weakness." Later that week, the precinct bulletin board displayed a newly typed memo. Subject: Service Recognition Protocol Update. Effective immediately, the precinct will observe monthly Veteran Appreciation Days to honor past and present military service among staff. All officers will attend a mandatory session on military trauma awareness and veteran transition challenges. It was signed by Captain Reeves. But the signature wasn't what caught attention. It was what had been stapled beneath it. A photo, blown up in black and white, of Walter Bishop, younger, in combat gear, hauling a wounded soldier over his shoulder with flames in the background. The caption read, "The things we clean up aren't always blood or coffee. Sometimes they're memories." In the days that followed, Walter returned to work just as he always did. He mopped the same hallways, he fixed the same flickering lights. But something had shifted in the air. Now, when he walked into a room, officers paused. They nodded first. They offered him coffee. Some asked him questions, quietly, respectfully. "Sir, were you really in Quezon? Is it true you carried the general? Did you ever lose anyone?" Walter never answered directly, but every so often his eyes would glaze over, just for a second, and in that silence they got their answer. One day, a rookie named Daniels, the youngest in the precinct, caught up to Walter outside the station. Daniels had been a baby-faced recruit with something to prove, but today he held something in his hand, a worn copy of The Things They Carried. "I read this," he said, hesitating. "I think I get it now, at least a little." Walter looked at the book, then at the kid's eyes. There was sincerity there, maybe confusion, but no mockery. Walter nodded once, then placed a hand briefly on the boy's shoulder. That was all. But Daniel stood a little straighter after that. In the weeks that followed, Officer Warren was reassigned, not as punishment, but as a lesson. He was transferred to a joint outreach program with the VA, helping unhoused veterans access benefits and housing. At first, he hated it. But one afternoon, an old Marine named Curtis came in, missing a leg and still wearing his unit patch. When Warren tried to rush the intake, Curtis snapped. "You ever seen someone's eyes when you zip their buddy into a bag?" Warren stopped. He didn't know what to say. He thought of Walter. He thought of the way that quiet old man had stood there in silence, absorbing every word he had spat at him, and never once lowering his eyes. From that day forward, Warren took the time to learn the names of the veterans who came through. And at night, he started writing down their stories. Not for anyone else, just to remember. Back at the precinct, a new plaque had appeared beside the staff photo wall. Walter Bishop, janitor, veteran, guardian. Some clean floors, others clean up after wars. Both deserve our respect. Walter never looked at it directly, but when no one was around, he was often seen dusting it. One rainy morning, a man in a tailored suit stepped into the precinct, holding a large envelope. He asked for Walter by name. The envelope contained a letter from the Department of Defense. Inside was an official apology, 50 years late. It acknowledged the denial of Walter's Medal of Honor nomination due to bureaucratic loss and political complications during the end of his last tour. "We can never repay what was denied, but we hope history will remember what your country once forgot." Walter read it once, folded it carefully, and placed it in the same box where he kept the medal. When asked if he was angry, he said simply, I did not serve for applause. I served so others could come home. The years did not slow Walter Bishop, but they softened the edges of his presence. He still arrived before dawn, still checked the same leaky ceiling on the third floor, still brought extra rags in winter because he knew how slush crept under boots and into bones. But now a quiet reverence followed him. New officers didn't just nod. They rose when he entered the room, some out of respect, some because they'd heard the story, and others because they'd read the book. Yes, there was a book now. One of the officers, Daniels, the rookie Walter had once met at the bus stop, had compiled the oral histories he'd recorded during his outreach work with the VA. In the introduction, he dedicated the entire volume to one man, to Walter Bishop, who never asked to be saluted, but earned every one. The book, The Janitor's Medal, became required reading at the State Police Academy. Cadets were made to read it before they received their first badge. It was not about battle tactics or crime reports. It was about humility, humanity, and the quiet power of doing the right thing when no one is watching. Every year on Veterans Day, the precinct held a memorial breakfast. For the first time, the keynote speaker wasn't a police captain or state official. It was Walter. And when he stood behind the podium, his voice was soft, raspy, but the room fell completely still. He spoke for exactly 90 seconds. I have mopped up blood in this building, and I have mopped up blood on jungle soil. I have buried brothers, and I have seen too many names forgotten. But what I have never done is look down on a man because his story was quieter than mine. If you want to wear this badge, that's your job. But if you want to honor it, that's your choice. No applause followed, just silence, the kind that carries weight. Walter passed away on a Tuesday in early spring. It was quiet, peaceful, alone, but not unloved. He was found in his modest apartment, sitting in his old recliner, a copy of Daniel's book open on his chest, and his Medal of Honor replica resting gently on the table beside him. The last entry in his notebook was dated the day before. Still grateful, still proud, still watching over them. His funeral was held at the precinct gymnasium. No fewer than 4 generals attended. The governor sent a wreath. Every seat was filled. Veterans came from 5 states. Officers who had never met him stood in full dress uniform, some holding their hats to their hearts, others with their hands trembling at their sides. When the honor guard folded the flag and presented it, it was not to a widow, nor to a family member. It was placed on the podium, because Walter had no surviving kin. But that flag belonged to all of them now. Later that week, the janitor's closet was left untouched, not for lack of purpose, but because no one could quite bring themselves to clear it out. His mop still leaned against the wall. His toolbox, organized down to the last washer, sat unopened. And on the inside of the door, a single note had been taped. Do what needs to be done, even if no one notices. A few months later, the precinct completed construction on a small memorial garden behind the building. A stone bench, a plaque, and a bronze sculpture of an old man with a mop in one hand and a medal on his chest. Etched in stone beneath it, Walter Bishop. He served in silence. He led by example. He left the floors clean and the hearts cleaner. Every year on the anniversary of his passing, officers gather there. Some bring coffee. Some bring letters. Some bring their sons or daughters and tell them, in simple words, about a janitor who once stood taller than any badge. There's a legend that still floats among the rookies, that sometimes, late at night, if the hallway outside the evidence room gets too quiet, you can hear the soft swish of a mop on tile. No one's afraid of it. They say it feels safe, like someone still watching, still serving, still making sure they're living up to the legacy. And once a year, on the new cadet's first day, they are all brought into the locker room. A sergeant stands before them, holding a small framed item. It's a faded patch from Walter's old uniform. He doesn't say much, just 3 words: earn the mop. Because in this world, there are warriors with medals and statues. And then there are warriors with mops and silence, who still carry the weight of honor with every step. And if we ever forget the difference, we were never worthy of either. Steel Heart Stories, because the strongest salutes are the ones never seen.